Oh. Oh. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today I'm just going to be showing off a few different book hauls I got, just combining them all together to make one big book haul. So these books come from Amazon and Barnes & Noble because thankfully our Barnes & Noble opened back up. So I took a few trips to the various ones around here. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'll start with my Amazon pile. So I got Warcross by Marie Lu. I also got Legend, but I got that a while back and haven't read it yet. But I'm really interested in this one because I heard it was similar to Ready Player One, which I haven't read yet, but I've heard a bunch of people really liked it. But this one's supposed to be more more takes place in the real world and the game world. And I hear that there's the second book, Wildcard, is supposed to be like really dark, and I love a good dark story, so I really want to read through this one and then Wildcard. And this cover is just so pretty. Like, I had to get the hardback edition just because I loved the cover so much. Alright, so then the next one I got is Pet Sematary, which I'm super duper excited about. I love Stephen King, I love the movies, I love his books. And being that this was the one that everyone was like, oh, well, it's his scariest one, and the one that he said that he thought about almost not publishing because of how scary it was, very interested in that, because I just recently read The Outsider, so that one was pretty ooky spooky, so I'm hoping this one really gets it. And I love both movie adaptations. I know it's controversial because not a lot of people like the most recent one, but I loved it, so really excited to read this one. The next one I got was Wilder Girls, and every time I would go into Barnes & Noble or I would shop on Amazon, I would see this book. Oh, the reflection keeps getting it. There we go. Oh, there we go. I would see this book and I really wanted to get it, but I would always talk myself out of it. And finally, I just committed and I said, this month we're reading Lord of the Flies and Wilder Girls, and so I just buckled down and got it. And thankfully I got the hardback edition for pretty cheap, so I was very excited. The only thing is, so you can see there's like pieces coming off like this, and I figured it wasn't that big of a deal because I was like, oh, it's like body horror for the book, because people in the book experience body horror and skin coming off, and it's like the skin's coming off. I know, it's lame, but I thought it was cool. But so this book's basically about these girls that live in this school and this thing that they call the tox has broken loose, and I'm assuming that's short for like toxic. So this tox breaks loose and they have body mutations. They're supposed to be a good bit of body horror, and I love body horror, so I'm very excited about that. And it's just them like waiting for rescue and going along in this world. I've heard it compared to Lord of the Flies, which I actually just read, and I have to say I was pretty disappointed by Lord of the Flies, but I have high hopes for this one, and I'd like to see like why people compare them, and if she took anything from the Lord of the Flies books, that would be like, oh, that's pretty similar. So very, very excited about this. This is actually what I am currently reading. This next book I also got off of Amazon, and I've actually already read it, so I guess it's kind of cheating to have it in the haul, but it's The Last Wish. So it's a part of the Witcher series, and it's on Goodreads. It's called The Witcher .5 because it came out a few years after the first book, but it's supposed to kind of set up the world for the series. So this actually wasn't really on my radar. It was my boyfriend who, every time we go in Barnes & Noble, he saw it and he's like, oh, I want to read that. And so one day I was like, oh, well, here's the mass market paperback for $10. I'm gonna get it for him. So I surprised him with it, and thinking like, oh, he'll get a kick out of reading it and that'd be cute and everything. And then all of a sudden he's like, so are you going to get it too? And are you going to read it with me? And I was like, now I guess I have to. And boy, am I so happy I did, because I loved this book. Like this, I was debating between giving it 4 stars and 5 stars, and I ended up just thinking to myself, like, I could not find anything I disliked about it, so I had to give it 5 stars. Definitely a great introduction to the series, and I'm so excited to read the first true book, Blood of Elves. So that's it for my Amazon pile. The next 3 piles are all from Barnes & Nobles, but they're different trips I took. So, I was in different states of mind. I'll have my eye on different things. All right, so the first one, I'll go in chronological order. Okay. So I went and I got the Immortalists. So someone on my Facebook, because I post a lot of my book reviews on Facebook, they recommended this book. It had been on my radar, but it wasn't anything I was super duper hyped to get. It was just something I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And for some reason, I kept confusing this book with the Elementalists. I'm not sure if it's plural or not, but I do not know why I kept confusing the two, but now I have it set straight because I actually also read this book. Again, kind of cheating on the haul, but hey, it was still a part of my book haul, and most of these I haven't read. And I loved this book. I absolutely loved it so much. Just the characters were great, the story was great, the concept was great. The concept is just that these 4 siblings whenever they're young, go to a fortune teller. They get their fortunes of when they're going to die, dates, and then you see them live their lives. And it very much has, I will say one thing, this book, I feel like, is marketed as fantasy, but it's not. It's more mysticism, because there's no real fantastical elements. There's just that fortune teller with the prediction. That's about it. So that's why I classify it as mysticism, not fantasy. But they live their life according to these prophecies, and it makes you wonder, like, the difference between, or the fate versus choice, destiny versus choice, and if they are just living up to the self-fulfilling prophecy, which I love psychology and everything, so whenever you put mysticism and some little psychology elements trickled in there, I love it. So this, highly recommend. And it was on the Barnes & Noble buy one get one 50% off. So the second book that I got for the buy one get one half off was The Cabin at the End of the World. Now, I love horror. I love horror movies. I love horror books. I don't know too much about, but I figured for like a horror book, I didn't really want to get too deep dive into what it's about, because if there's like surprises or anything, I don't want to know. Like, I want to be hit out of the blue without knowing. Because that was one problem I had with The Outsider. I kind of knew what was coming, kind of spoiled it for myself a little bit, so I'm like, okay, when's this going to come? When's this going to come? Okay, there it is. Whereas I'd rather just get hit out of nowhere and just be flopped with this monster or whatever the heck's going on. So, very, very excited about this. And then the last one from that specific trip to Barnes & Noble was another Stephen King book, If It Bleeds. So, this book hadn't necessarily been on my to-read radar, but I kept seeing it at Barnes & Noble. I kept seeing it pop up, and it was in the 30% off section, so of course I was like, oh, maybe I should get it because it's 30% off. And I was like, nah, I don't think I'll like it, because from my understanding, originally this is, originally I thought this was just a bunch of random, spooky short stories. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'd rather sit down and read like a whole novel, because I'm not too crazy about just an anthology of short stories. I'm more of like a sit down novel, long read kind of gal. But on my Facebook, someone mentioned that this was a sequel to The Outsider, and I loved The Outsider. So I looked into it, and sure enough, it is. So I immediately, after finding that out, rushed to Barnes & Noble and picked it up with that 30% off. And so I'm very much looking forward to reading this one. All right. So for my next Barnes & Noble trip, I got 3 little books. Again, Stephen King. Got Misery. We all know what it's about, but for those of you who don't, so basically this writer, Paul Sheldon, he goes and he's in a car wreck in the mountains. This woman, Annie, finds him and nurses him back to health, but then ends up keeping him captive because her favorite character in his book series, Misery, got killed off, and she's not having that. So she makes him rewrite it. So she really thinks she's doing the right thing when really she's not, and she's kind of crazy. But I've always wanted to read this book. Kathy Bates as Annie is one of the best performances ever. Oh, I love it so much. Another Stephen King, Carrie. I had to get these. I'm assuming these were the mass market paperback editions because they were like less than $10. So I was like, I better just pick it up. Very interested to see, because I hear this book differs a little, which I mean, of course, all books differ from the movies, but I hear there's some main parts that differ, so I'm very much looking forward to this. This is basically about Carrie White. Her mother's rather abusive, and she starts getting picked on at school, and once she hits puberty, she realizes she has psychic powers, but things don't turn out too well, and in this is the infamous pig blood scene, but I'm still looking forward to reading this. And then the last one from that specific shopping experience, okay, this one was purely a cover buy. I normally don't do that. I normally don't see a cover and I'm like, I want that. Usually it's like, oh, this is a book I already wanted and I'm going to find the edition with the cover that I really like, or the cover doesn't really matter to me and I'm just like, yeah, I just want to read the story. But this one, I saw the spine of the book and I was like, oh, that art looks cool. So then I picked it up, read a little bit of the synopsis, and I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and get it. It's less than $10. Yeah, it was only $8, so I had to pick it up. And that is White Trash Zombie. Excuse me, My Life as a White Trash Zombie. And this is what it looks like. I love this artwork so much. I love the colors used. I love how she looks so fun and punk, but then there's also those pinks in there. Oh my goodness. But it's pretty much just reading the back, I didn't watch the show iZombie, but I'd seen bits and pieces, and this definitely kind of reminded me of it, because girl dies, turns into a zombie, and then I think she starts working at the morgue, which is kind of what happens in iZombie. I found out this was a series, and I looked up the books, and all of the books, I love the cover art so much. I love this punky look to her, and then just the muted colors with pastel pink. Oh, and then the touch of red. I'm just very excited to read this, and I mean, hey, it was $8, so if it's not that good, oh well, but I got a feeling it's gonna be fun and interesting. I want to see how Angel Crawford's life is as an undead being. Alright. So then my last stack, it was my most recent trip to Barnes & Noble. I just can't stay away from that place. This haul was just a bunch of fiction books, except for maybe one or two. So first one I got, one I have been looking at, which is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, about a therapist who relays her experience as a therapist with her clients and then her experience in therapy. I've seen a few booktubers who have talked about this, but the main one was Reading with Cindy and how she said it made her cry and everything. So, and it's a psychology book, so I was like, lots of emotion and psychology, I have to read it. So I'm very, very excited to read this. I love reading about therapist experiences and the experiences of people who've gone through therapy. So this should be very interesting, especially the view of someone who is a therapist going to another therapist, because they kind of have inside information and they can talk more on it and things like that. So I'm very interested. The next one, actually, I got this because of my brother. He had it and kind of talked about it. So just based on what he told me, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm going to get that. And that is The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxbly, the guy who wrote Brave New World. Now, I read Brave New World this year, absolutely loved it. 5-star book to me. So how my brother explained this was that basically he does drugs and talks about some philosophy stuff. And that sounds awesome, especially when he has, I mean, based on the book Brave New World, he obviously has some big opinions about what's going on, so I'm very interested to read it. It's a pretty short read too, so I feel like I'll get through it pretty quickly, so very, very excited to read that. Also, I just love the cover. You see the doors, and I just immediately think of Jim Morrison, could not think, and things like that, and that's really what this cover reminds me of, so I love them, so we'll see how that goes. Although I know Jim Morrison and the Doors of Perception probably have no relation, but you know, making connections, that's fun. Alright, so the next book I got actually was not, it was just something I saw and read the cover and I was like, that sounds interesting. It's actually thanks to this book that I got it, because normally I don't peruse the philosophy section. I took a philosophy course in college. It was okay, it was interesting, but I find some philosophy a little hard to read and understand, and sometimes I don't want to think too hard about what I'm reading, so I don't tend to gravitate towards philosophy. But I was in the philosophy section to pick up this, so I was like, oh, I might as well look, and there was Godless. I'm very, very interested to read this, and actually got my mom interested in reading this. It says it's how an evangelical preacher became one of America's leading atheists. Very excited to read this because that is such a big transition. Like, that is a huge jump, and I want to see like what happened to this man, what went through his mind to have him make that huge leap. And I think this will be very, very interesting. Not sure if it's really a memoir, but I'd love a good memoir, so we'll see how this turns out. And if anything, even if I don't like it, my mom expressed interest in it, so I'll just give it to her if I don't like it. Yes. And so then the last book I got was, and the reason I got this was because it was, again, the mass market paperback edition. Your girl's cheap sometimes, alright? It was less than $10, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna see how it is, and that is Eleanor Old Effect. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Is completely fine. And again, it was just $10, so I was like, I might as well get it. It's on the Reese's Book Club. I heard this book was a little problematic, so I was a little iffy about picking it up, but I figured I might as well just read it, see what it's about and everything, and at the end of the day, it was only like $10, so it's not like I spent $20 on a book that's going to make me mad or something. It was just $10. If I don't like it, I'll just donate it to the bookstore or the library, and at least someone will get some use out of it. I'm not as sure of what this is about. Hey, Reese Witherspoon said it was written well and funny, so I'll check it out, give it a little read. It shouldn't be too bad since it's smaller, more condensed and everything, so I guess we'll see. So those are the 13 books that I recently got. Very much looking forward to reading them all. Of course, I have a list of TBR books that is 1.5 miles long, and I'm the type of person who I get new books and I'm like, I want to read these now, and then kind of put my other stuff on the back burner, but I'm trying not to do that. Every month I'm making a list of the books I definitely want to read and then fitting some in where I can. So we will see what happens, and again, very much looking forward to them. Thank you for watching. If you've read any of these books or want to read any of these books, let me know. Talk about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions on them, and just see what's up. Alright, well, thank you for watching, and y'all have a great day.